Howdy, can you all hear me? Hi. I'm going to go a little bit off script. I know that the original briefing was to sort of talk about my vocational journey and talk about optimism in the face of climate change, but I'm sort of folding climate change into sort of a larger thing that I've been thinking about, which is this growing sense of nihilism that we have. So that's sort of more what I'm going to talk about. I hope you'll indulge me. Anyway, this picture that you see up here is one of my favorite things that happens in nature. So this is a little hillside in the mountains of South Africa where I spent some time in October and November of last year. So this is a post-fire habitat. So it was really kind of overgrown. There's lots of dead wood. Fire comes and it acts as a renewal. And you see this regrowth of fresh vegetation. Some species, including this little orchid here that is this little pink flower you see, would not be seen in this vegetation type unless it burns. So fire isn't always bad. It's good to keep that in mind. All right. So I was born into a national state of emergency at the crest of the apartheid government in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was in prison. The African National Congress was outlawed. Black people were not allowed in the cities after dark. The cities, their labor helped to build and run. Bombs exploded in the city shopping centers. There were bombs in train stations, at magistrate courts. Arrests of troublemakers like the Archbishop of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu, were a common feature of the news. My mom and dad would sometimes not come home from work until after 10 p.m. at night because the National Security Police had cordoned off whole city blocks so that they could go through every single person's belongings trying to look for evidence that someone was in collusion with the communists. Every stairwell at my primary school had a big red poster in it that had these molded plastic models of grenades and limpet mines and other incendiary devices. Their shapes are molded into my sense memory after all of these years still. There's an echo of those turbulent days in 2025, I feel. Around the world, it seems that people have developed a sort of cabin fever, like we're all being stuck on this hot and crowded planet together, feeling like greed and human selfishness has already ruined everything, so we might just hasten our own demise and just get it over with. Some who can afford to are even sort of dreaming about leaving and going to colonize Mars. But instead of doing that, I keep dreaming of the green planet we're currently on, which hundreds of millions of years of natural selection has finally attuned our bodies to, where we became matter aware of itself. And it's not through ignorance or naivety that I hold on to this vision of a future society that integrates respect for nature and ecosystem-level thinking into its functioning. The African value system of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, it's rooted in ecological thinking. We create each other. So the people of South Africa were relentless in the struggle for freedom and achieved it in 1994 with the first free and fair elections open to everyone over the age of 18. I vividly remember the people standing in long lines all day on April 27, 1994, to vote for the first time. Some of these people were in their 80s and just so excited. There was a sense of hope and optimism about what the potential of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow could be in the country. And this compelled people to persist in the fight for freedom against a system built to exclude and suppress and oppress. And that feeling of rebirth and regrowth was taking hold at large, even as I started thinking more deeply about my own purpose in this world. So I'm just going to skip over all of the vocational stuff, because we can talk about that later. But I'll just say that I have completed many, many years of work and study in plant genetics and in molecular biology. And it's because I am by nature a passionately curious person, but also because of something that Alexander Finley, a professor of chemistry at the University of Aberdeen, worded perfectly back in 1925. He said, The cultivation of the spirit of science appeals not only to the intellect, but creates also an emotional and aesthetic pleasure, and so ministers to that other side of the mental and spiritual life, the desire for beauty. As I stand before you today, my primary vocational driver has matured into this: the pursuit of beauty in this world, finding, understanding, creating, and sharing it, propelled by something that I call defiant optimism. To me, there is staggering beauty in the natural world, and understanding how living organisms work doesn't diminish the wonder and the awe, it deepens it. I became a plant geneticist because I wanted to look at the genomes of plants and understand them from the inside out. Plants are not set dressing. They're not just the green backdrop to the animal actors. They are active participants in the story of life on Earth. They have vivid, charismatic personalities. They have ingenious problem-solving skills and fiercely fascinating modes of defending themselves against pests, pathogens, herbivores, competitors. So nearly a decade ago now, I first had the idea that I one day wanted to write a book about plants in peril. It seemed important to tell these stories before too many cool things were gone from this planet forever, to celebrate and showcase the intrinsic value in the natural world. Intrinsic, that means plants matter, not just because they are a source of oxygen, food, pharmaceuticals, fiber, or you can burn them for fuel. No, they matter because they exist, and they are beautiful, and I care about them, and you should too. A recent estimate calculates that since 1900, nearly 3 species of plants have disappeared per year, 500 times faster than they naturally would. Plants are going extinct because they are running out of habitat. Humans are rapidly converting all of the remaining wild places on the planet to agriculture, industrial operations, housing developments, strip malls, golf courses. Climate change is hastening the decline. Plants are running out of room. So initially, this idea for this book I had was that the book would have 2 parts. The first part would be about plants for which it is already too late, species that have gone extinct because of human greed, colonialism, and apathy. The second part would be about plants in utmost danger, on the brink of extinction, and I would tell the stories of what events transpired that lead us to this moment of such severe biodiversity loss that it's been called the 6th mass extinction event. And so during my sabbatical last year, I made my way to various parts of the world where people were working with some of the planet's most critically endangered plants. I wanted to talk to folks from my research firsthand and get their boots on the ground, in the trenches, level perspective on this deeply worrying problem. In the fall, I traveled to the Fairchild Botanic Garden at Coral Gables in Florida, the Hortus Botanicus at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands, and Stellenbosch University Botanic Garden in South Africa. So I'm not going to tell you about all of the cool things that happened, the things I saw, the people I talked to, because I want you to buy the book. So once that's out, you'll be able to read those stories. But I do want to share this. In every place that I visited, I encountered people driven to hopeful acts by a sense of urgency, a desire to act locally and save what can be saved. The work of plant conservation is an act of defiance. It bucks the trend of cowardly capitulation, of apathetic resignation. It replaces the, oh, well, what can you do attitude with a, let's try something attitude. Even a small and inconspicuous plant species, something with a very small extent of occurrence on the planet, it's still doing stuff. It's still part of a connected network of pollinators and herbivores and fungi and microbes in the soil. Plants are habitat. And just because we don't know about it yet, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. So in Florida, how does this thing work? So in Florida, I met Dr. Jennifer Posley, and you can kind of see her hands there at the top. She's the South Florida Conservation Program Manager at the Fairchild Botanic Garden, and she's done some staggering work for just such a small, inconspicuous plant species. I'm actually highlighting it in that little inset photograph down at the bottom. So I tagged along with her and her entire research team as they checked up on a recent reintroduction of this species, sand flax, Linum arenicola. It's a critically imperiled Florida native, and they reintroduced it into this tiny little preserve of this amazingly precious habitat called pine rockland. So imagine, if you will, it's sort of a humid morning, the sun is sort of shining onto these amazing low-growing silver palms, and they're kind of checkerboarded throughout underneath this open canopy of slash pine. And there are all these other plants there, like quailberry and coontie and milkwort. And there's interesting bird chirps. You never see the birds, you just hear them. I loved nerding out with all of these fellow plant nerds on this excursion. All of these amazing plants before me. But what struck me the most was the care that these folks practiced. We spent hours on our knees on exposed rock, it seemed like that. We were dodging thorns and plants with caustic sap that causes severe burns, while we were recounting the recruitment of this tiny little plant. This plant that most people would just overlook entirely. This sandflax ends up being just like, it's a little like, you can't believe how small it is. It's just like a green little wiry stem, like yay tall, thin, 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 with these tiny, tiny yellow flowers. Easy to overlook. It was really difficult to spot them. But every time we found one, every single person was absolutely delighted. People were just smiling and squealing. It is here, it exists, and it is beautiful. Not only were these people extremely excited about ostensibly insignificant plants in the restoration program, but their efforts were working. The population of this plant has gone from almost being wiped off the planet entirely to there now being several hundred individuals, and the population size is increasing. It's working. It can happen. So Jennifer and her team were making a difference despite the urban sprawl, despite defunding of science and sustainability efforts, despite public incognizance. They remained defiantly optimistic. In South Africa, I joined curator Donovan Kirkwood and his team of conservation and restoration scientists from the Stellenbosch University Botanic Garden on field trips to rescue some of South Africa's most imperiled plants. Donovan and his team, they don't sort of run out in front of the bulldozers. They're not those kinds of people. Instead, what they do is they find ways to convince the construction team to let them borrow the bulldozers to scoop out whole plant communities away from the developers before they get trampled and destroyed, and then they go put them in safekeeping at the Botanic Garden in these kiddie pools full of native soil, until they can be reintroduced into places where they will be safe, and where they can thrive, and where they will continue to contribute their genetic diversity to thriving ecosystems. It's amazing what they can do. So in one place, which I'm kind of highlighting in these photos here, there's the last population of a critically endangered orchid. And it has these brilliantly white flowers with these sort of blue-green flecked beards on them. And it's still holding on despite 98% of its original range being gone. There's around 100 plants left in the world, and they survive in this tiny pocket of habitat, rapidly being swallowed up by urban expansion, illegal dumping, and by encroaching invasive wattles from Australia. These non-native plants, introduced by European colonial powers at the age of empire, they're disrupting the natural fire ecology of this heathland. So the fires burn at a different frequency. They're more frequent, and this doesn't really allow the natural vegetation to regenerate, fully complete its life cycle before the fire kills everything. So these orchids are so threatened, but also so charismatic, that they are incredibly vulnerable to poaching, which is surprising. So I wasn't allowed at the time to say when I was going, where I was going. I couldn't say who I was with, and I wasn't allowed to post even pictures of the other vegetation, the other plants that were in this environment, lest they were clues for the poachers. It's such a funny thing. As you can see here in the picture on the right, kind of, sort of, I had a tiny stylus, and so with the stylus I had the honor of playing the pollinator. So I was helping these plants by sort of replacing the original carpenter bee that would have pollinated them, but the carpenter bee itself is in such decline that it is no longer able to pollinate the plants so that there is sufficient seed set to preserve the species. So without human assistance, things look dire. But here again, I found people engaged in this defiantly optimistic act, hand-pollinating plants, going away, coming back weeks later, checking up, collecting seed pods, and then germinating them in sterile nutrient jelly in the lab at Stellenbosch University. So since I've been in Minnesota, I've been getting regular texts from Donovan Kirkwood with news of plants that have long thought to be extinct. Some of them have been logged as being extinct for over a century, but they're rediscovered simply because people are now looking for them. I've set up a Google alert about this sort of thing now, so I have these articles on the rediscovery of lost species. Yeah, it's true, a lot of the things that get rediscovered are immediately put on the endangered species list, but that is a list of hope. It's not a list of, oh, well, what can you do? So these days I get more joy out of joy scrolling than doom scrolling. I really suggest you find a way to do that. I also get updates on the progress of the orchids at Stellenbosch in the tissue culture lab, and they're growing extremely happily in their flasks. Soon they'll be ready to return to the places they've been missing from since the 1950s, since before the people of South Africa started dreaming themselves free. We must keep advocating for the preservation of our natural heritage and keeping some places wild for plants to grow and for our imaginations to grow. It's betting on biodiversity. It's hope and care in the form of dirty work pants, ArcGIS data points, flasks of pH-optimized plant growth media, and people. I have seen the evidence firsthand, and I have so much faith in people. Because we create each other. We can create the world we wish to live in, and it is going to be so beautiful. I remain defiantly optimistic about that. Thank you.